Okay, so here we go. This is my talk, Designing Levels That Don't Have a Right Answer. And it's going to be a little bit of a weird journey because I feel like a lot of the context is really important. So I added this messy subtitle at the bottom, a very personal adventure through aimless, directionless, and pointless video game and level design. So here we go. I'll introduce myself really briefly. Here, I've got an itch page. This is like a nice introduction. I'm Droqen. I've made a bunch of games throughout, like over the past decade or something. It's crazy. I think that the one that is probably best known is Starseed Pilgrim. That one was like nominated for an IGF award, which is pretty cool. That was in 2015, and like in the 7 years since Starseed Pilgrim came out, I haven't done anything, but you know, I'm working on it. And I'll be using some of these games for examples. So hopefully you'll find that interesting. I'll close this. So I'm going to start with I've got these like orange slides that kind of are questions and concepts that I sort of had in my head about what games are. And levels, way back in 2012 or 2013 or something, I made a blog for myself and I called it Lose Your Way. Because I really liked the idea of a game where you can lose your way. Like the core path wasn't what I really played games for. I played games to make choices and to have my own experiences. And to me, it felt like the epitome of what like a good game was. I don't know if it was like a good game, but the kind of games that I wanted to involve myself in, to spend time in, were ones that felt like real places. The word immersion gets floated around a lot. So there are some types of games that feel kind of like real places. Dwarf Fortress tries to simulate a whole world. There's this game that's pictured is called Earth Tongue, and it's this whole self-contained simulation of bugs and fungus, which I find really beautiful and fascinating. There was a roguelike called Ilona that I played that had dungeons that you could go down into and towns and like a huge world that you could wander around, and kind of along that line there's open world games where you can do whatever you want. There's MMORPGs, and there was just this sort of fantasy of a game as a real place that you could inhabit, not as a person there to solve a bunch of problems, but just as someone who could spend some time in that place. And I think becoming a game designer, the process of becoming better at designing games and thinking about how to design games really had me crashing up against the invisible walls that are sort of necessary. So it's a little bit embarrassing to me to admit that this fantasy of the open world is something that often gets in my way. When I'm trying to design a game, I'll get caught up in the fantasy of what world I'm trying to express. And then once the game gets to a certain point, it's like I have this world that I can spend time in now, but I've lost sight of how to design it. Because most practical game design that I come across is very focused on delivering like a specific experience, a specific way of playing. So the techniques and labels that I'm kind of traveling through here, they are all these tricks and techniques that I use to help me distance myself from the fantasy of the game as a real place. And it's a tough balance, because I still think that that's like it's a really beautiful idea, to be able to immerse yourself in a world and perceive it as a real place temporarily. So one of the earliest terms that I really said to myself was arcade ecosystem, when I was trying to break apart the world and the game. There's a game that I made a long time ago, 2010, 2012, something, called Probability Zero. And it was really, really simple. You just, hopefully you can see my cursor. I really want to, but even if you can't see my cursor, it should be fine. But you're this little character, and it was, it was a roguelite that came out a little bit after Spelunky. And part of it is kind of like an arcade game. I called it an arcade ecosystem, so that's where the term came from. You have a score. Actually, well, I do a lot to try and obfuscate the score, but basically your score is how deep you get. And it's an arcade game. Like, you have a score, you are a singular important thing in the world. There's nothing like you. You're powerful. You can level up. You gain powers. And as this powerful entity, as the player, you can really easily play again and again. When you die, it doesn't mean like a real sort of death. But on the other hand, it also was trying to deliver on this dream of being a real place, of being an ecosystem. The enemies all had these inner lives and weird behaviors that I thought were very alive. So some enemies would eat each other, and after making that game, I wanted to make more worlds that felt more alive than that. And then whenever you die in probability 0, this is like a really small touch, but it just kind of keeps scrolling for a little bit, and all the enemies are still alive and stuff. Like, the world carries on without you, which again it doesn't help with the arcade gaminess. That doesn't make it more of a game, but it made it more of a world. So when I came up with the term arcade ecosystem, I had drawn this line between the game and the world. The game was the arcade. It has win states and lose states. It has a quote unquote right answer. It says, when you do this thing, you will be rewarded, so as to drive you to continue playing. And on the other hand, there was a world just full of these agents, entities that would behave in certain ways, but those behaviors didn't demand a response from you. That was just the way the world worked. Sort of a parallel. Sorry, one second. Ugh. Sort of a parallel concept that I developed was the tiger and the garden. And this came from let's see, hopefully I could describe this well. So this is a picture from a Chinese garden in Suzhou. And in one of them, I can't remember the name of the one. I was trying to find the pictures from my photographs. But they're these walled off gardens that are ridiculously landscaped. And in one of them, one of the gardens was owned by an artist who kept a tiger in this garden. And I can't, and that kind of blew my mind a little bit. But he kept a tiger in his garden, and so that he could paint this tiger, or maybe draw it. I'm pretty sure it was painting though. And I had these interesting parallels to the arcade ecosystem idea of these two aspects of a game. One that is within the player's control, you could call it gamified. It's directed, it's measured, it says, here's what you're supposed to do. And that doesn't quite, that's more arcade than garden. And then on the other side, the tiger felt like part of the ecosystem. They're both out of your control and wild. And so tiger and garden, arcade ecosystem, these kind of hung out in my head for a while. But it was really hard to actually sit down and design things with these conflicting motivations in place. Saying, okay, I'm going to design a game where part of it is within your control and part of it is all outside of your control. It's a nice idea, but it's not exactly actionable. So then I started to get into playables, which were like games minus the gamification. I thought there was a period, I don't know if you were, whoever's listening, I don't know if you were around during this big wave of, oh, everything's going to be gamified now. But the idea that you could take an activity that you wanted to do, do some exercise and go running, or checking off items in your to-do list, and you could reward yourself in a game-like way. That was gamification. So you could take something that was distinctly not a game and you could add this layer of gamification, which would make it more compelling. And I just kind of had this weird thought that games were just something gamified. Like you could strip away the gamification from a video game. What would you be left with? You'd be left with just kind of like an interactive thing, a toy. And I wanted to have a better word for that. So I just made one up. It was playable. I think it might have been short for like playable art or playable artwork or something, but it ended up being just like playables. And I spent a while experimenting with, can I use my experience making games to make these things that are gameless games? And I guess it culminated in this jam that I ran on itch.io. You can look it up if you want. It's the Make 10 Playables Variety Jam 2019. And I challenge people to make 10 different things. I don't think anyone actually made 10 things. The Variety Jam is actually going on now for this year. Completely different theme, but it's still, try to make 10 games in like a really small period of time in different genres, just to broaden your scope of like things that you've made. It's fun. But for that year, it was 10 playables because I was losing my mind with just like, I want to make more playables. I want other people to think about playables with me. So this is Bambalan. It's one of the playables that was submitted to the Make 10 Playables Jam. And it says at the bottom, this is a playable thing made for Playables Jam 2019. It lacks common game features such as goals, menus, and instructions. This was done on purpose following the Jam theme. Thank you, Ludipe, for following my instructions to the letter. If using their, yeah. So the controls are down here. I already know how to do it. But basically you can drop these, you can drop a ladder or you can drop breadcrumbs. I don't know if the beeping is coming through. It doesn't really matter too much. And you can go down the ladder and it sends you to a different room and you can go back. And these are game mechanics. Like, I could make a game around this. And I wanted to kind of make things that were like prototypes, but weren't called prototypes, that could stand on their own. But still, like, even looking back on this now, I'm like, I put out this call for, please make some playables with me, it'll be cool. And they still kind of feel a little bit prototype-y, like it's a thing and it feels like there is a game missing here. And you can make games for yourself, but it feels very aimless. It's fun to explore, and that's all there is. So I'll explore a couple others. So this is Chip Ocean. I can't actually play it because it's a paper game, well, paper playable. And so there's a bunch of instructions, but in brief, it's kind of a bunch of prompts for drawing stuff. You paint your nails, and then you wait for the nail polish to chip away, and then you draw a little world based on your chipped nail polish. So you can see here kind of the reference. And the thing that I thought was interesting here, the reason I'm bringing this one up specifically is because there is definitely a goal, but it's not a traditional video gamey like goal. This is more of like an art process. The result, like the goal, the explicit goal of Chip Ocean is to create this small artifact drawing. There's still a goal, there's still an activity, it's just not a traditional video game one. Oh, yeah. So then one of the ones that I made was this one called Being Jeweled. And I was showing this to a friend of mine, and basically the way it works is each of these jewels has kind of like a hidden value for how breakable it is. And excuse me. And the thing about this playable is, even though it doesn't give you any explicit goals, it's kind of only enjoyable if you set your own goals. So I can feel out the controls a little bit, but very quickly I want more. And it provides this implicit goal of knocking out all the gems or knocking out as many as you can. It's very easy, I think, to come to a conclusion about not necessarily what the game is telling you to do, but what you can do with this game. Let's see, I'm not sure how to exactly express this, but I think that most people who play this either come to the conclusion that they would like to do a particular thing with it, or they get bored and move on. And I'm not even going to play this one, really. It's procedurally generated and seeded. Hopefully it loads quickly. And so you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, it gives you your coordinates. So 1W, 1W, 1S, your 1 west, 1 south. And that's it. That's the entire thing. You don't even die. You can get stuck, but that's it. And there's no goals or anything. But one of the comments is this person saying, I set a goal of going as far straight down from the origin as I could. And I started mapping it out too, because it felt like, again, this was a system that just kind of had this implicit goal. And so I guess the conclusion that I got from all this is that when I made my playables, it was not an explicitly designed game, but I was making systems that people still found games to play inside the systems. So it kind of felt like I was just not doing my job as a game designer. I was doing like half the job. When I made these playables, I was just making a tool that you could use to play your own game with. And in particular, it felt like I wasn't doing my job because many people would, touch a playable and say, okay, well, I can play around with this, but I don't know what to do with it. So that was playables. And then after that, I kind of went headfirst back into, back into like games and challenges. So hopefully this works. I made this small game with combat. I just wanted to explore like a combat situation scenario, I guess. So it was based on the mechanics of Dark Souls. Like you can see that there's a little stamina meter here, and when you attack, it goes down, and like eventually you can't do it anymore. And here I started to realize that there was like a distinct like win or lose binary. After the playables, then coming into this, I was setting up a goal for the player where you're trying to get from one side of the screen to the other, but there wasn't really that many choices. You could make small choices within a screen, but you couldn't make like large choices about what your goals for the game were or anything. And I thought that these choices were really interesting, and I wasn't doing enough with them. All right, so this is kind of, this part of the talk is going to be a little messy, but hopefully it makes some sense. At this point, I started to think about designing levels with kind of player choice in mind, but inside a box, because as I, with the invisible walls, like every game experience, is already in a box anyway. Anyways, and so what I was trying to do is design a point from which the player could go in any direction, so the player could feel like they had a choice, rather than saying, making a puzzle game where I'm saying, okay, go from point A to point B, and it's your job as the player to find the path that I've prescribed to you. Okay, I need to, this is a loud version. Is my sound coming through of the game? I hope it's not, it's too loud.
No sound.
Okay, great, cool. I'll just turn it way down. Okay, so this is Handmade Death Labyrinth. It's a game that I made and released like a couple months ago. And when I was thinking about this game, I had this idea of designing every level with a very simple choice in mind for the player. It was, and I don't know if I even want to call it a choice, maybe a freedom, I'm not sure. And I think you'll see this a lot in, I don't think I've discovered anything particularly new. Like if you look up, I think it's something called like the Bartle taxonomy of player types, which kind of describes 4 player types: achievers, explorers, socializers, and killers. The way I remember it is oh yeah, here it is on the right. Oh no, they don't have it. I remember it because each of those roles is kind of assigned to a card suit, which makes it really memorable to me. But there's all these, there's definitely theories floating around about saying, there are different types of players and you can cater different parts of your game to different types of players. And so here, the only difference is that I'm explicitly saying every room in this game should be able to be solved in one of 2, I don't know if they're thematically distinct ways, but ways that I could see working for the entire game. So every screen in this game you can beat by killing everything on the screen or by running past everything. And this actually came out of that other game. Hold on, I'll just have 2 games running at once. When I sent this to people to play it, there were screens, well, this one is very hard to run past everything, but it's still possible. And some people did not even realize that you could run past everything, whereas others didn't, never even thought to kill everything on the screen. And there was this very interesting difference between approaches that people had to, what to me was a relatively singular axis of what's the best way to get through this room. But people found themselves on all different parts of a spectrum. And I don't think that this is any kind of universal spectrum or anything. I think it's really valuable to take something like this and just use it as one of many lenses, just to look at it and figure out, I can't remember the word, kind of heuristics for you as a designer, if you are a designer, to help you figure out ways to think about the game you're designing. So I'll just really quickly show, actually, I think it'll still be there, right? So I can kill the cockroach or I can just avoid it. Here in this room, there are these 2 zombies at the top. No one thinks they're zombies. Most people think they're like weird sphinxes or like babies with knives. Excuse me. And again, you can hopefully kind of see that I could, if I wanted to, just run straight down the middle here, or I could get into combat and fight them both. And almost everyone who gets to this room thinks that they do have to fight them and that they should fight them. And it's kind of interesting to me that this axis of player choice isn't something that I am trying to put at the forefront. I'm not trying to make a game that says to everyone who plays that, okay, you're now making a distinct choice between, are you going to fight everything or are you going to run away from everything? It's more of a subconscious communication. Different players will just approach things differently. And it helps me bridge that gap between the rigid gamified object that says, okay, here is the right answer and it's your job to find the right answer, and the world that doesn't really prescribe a right answer, the world that just exists on its own. And this isn't like a Mass Effect A/B choice. It's not, are you Paragon or the other one? I can't even remember what the other one is. It's more of something you can feel out. There is like a gradient between the 2. So that as a player, you can be playing on, you can run through one screen and fight in the other. But the thing about this division the valuable thing about this division to me is for inside my head, as I started with back here in my embarrassing story, with the arcade ecosystem and the tiger and the garden, the problem was I was still trying to design a linear game and also design a completely non-linear world. And although this is kind of like a new theory to me that I'm still developing and experimenting with, I think it's a good way to make something that kind of gets at both worlds, to think about a project that I'm working on as always presenting a choice. All right, so because my slides are not really, I wasn't sure how to visualize this exactly. Maybe I can draw it very quickly. So the way that I had been visualizing games before was that there was a path that you should walk or take. In something like Starseed Pilgrim, if you've played that, there's a common idea of all the mechanics of the game. You're trying to discover what are the rules of the game so that I can use them as good as possible to win. And the real path that most players took was this circuitous, winding route where they would, take some wrong turns and then say, "Oh, okay, I figured something out." But because they're blind to the knowledge that I have that I've laid out for them, they might go off in a random direction and eventually come back to the path. And this was very hard to design for. And I'm not saying it's not valuable. I think it's very interesting space to design a core path that you allow players to stray from, that you don't adhere them to very, very strongly. But seeing players wander off in these routes, a lot of the games that I've been designing, I wanted to be able to design some of these routes to be a little more conscious about it. But I wasn't sure how, because I could design two routes, right? I could say, oh, you can take the stealth route or the combat route. There's lots of games that do that. And it's still a little bit like that, but I think about them as being very intertwined choices where just, if I've defined two, let's see, fight, with that game, it was fight and flight. And then in every room, the same two choices are available. There's still room to draw your own path, and everyone's path is going to be different, but it's a path that I'm giving myself as a designer the keys to actually design, because it's very, very hard to, and when I say hard, I just kind of mean risky. Like, it's very random. You have to do a lot of playtesting, and you have to be cautious about what you cling to, because everyone's experience is going to be very different when you're designing a game like this. Whereas designing a game that has this type of choice, there is still a lot of discovery that a player can have and claim as their own and say, okay, like, this is my interpretation and it's mine. But it's something that you can actually work with as a designer. But this is what I'm talking about right now. I guess the only other thing that I have to talk about, I think there's a lot of other game design structures that can be looked at through this lens in a useful way. Something that's I see often is the idea of like a rewarding high risk, like high risk and high reward. And through this kind of lens of these two intertwining paths, where at every step along the way, the player there's a choice available to the player. Are you going to do one thing that allows you to still win, or are you going to do the other thing that allows you to still win? And then that, under this framework, is reframed as high risk versus low risk paths. And that's really just about balance. It's not like adding the high risk, high reward path. The high risk and the high reward are entangled. If there wasn't high reward, no one would take the high risk play, because inherent to risk is that it's going to cause you a lot of, it's going to be less likely to succeed or more harmful if it fails. And so you can see how under this sort of structure, if you are saying, okay, well, every single challenge in the game, there's a high risk and a low risk option. Also, sorry about my scribbles. Then again, you'll have this structure that you can design that allows for a constant degree of player choice and agency. Yeah. The last thing is I'm going to show a game called Fjords, which I think is really, I've only recently started to think of, again, in these terms. And oh no. So I've always really liked Fjords. And I think I kind of have the tools to understand why now. Let's see, help. Oh no, help. Set. Set. Sorry about this. The keyboard input is a little weird. Oh, come on. Oh, I see. Help set. There we go. Okay, so there are 8 different variables in Fjords that you can set. And this isn't a game about finding the right tools. You know, it's not about finding the right specific set of tools to overcome a problem. Most of the obstacles in your way can be solved using many different combinations of tools. So right now I have magic on, which all of your abilities trigger at the same time when you press the ability button. So I think all I have is magic, which makes this block raise me up, and then it becomes a solid block. And I can get around using this. I can get around just fine. Oops, I quit by accident. But I could switch my abilities to a completely different set of abilities and still be able to complete the challenges laid out before me. And there's definitely wrong choices too. Bombs T. Great. So I have bombs now. Sure. Sure, I'll just use bombs and magic. So now every time I press A, it'll lay a bomb down and also magic. So I don't know if you can see it. There's also audio feedback. Uh-oh. Well, I won't spend too much time in Fjords. I really like Fjords a lot. Oh yeah, here we go. The entire point I wanted to make with Fjords is that I've always really liked Fjords, and I liked that it gave me, as a player, a lot of choices for overcoming problems. And I guess it's only now that I've found this framework of saying every choice in my game is going to be solvable in one of 2 distinct ways. And I think that maintaining the same choice throughout an entire game, if you say, okay, there is a strategic way, like a slower paced way to solve every room, as well as a very twitchy action-based way to solve every room, then a player who approaches this game will have a much more liberated experience where they can hop between these 2 different streams of play. If you start here and you end here, and there's these two streams of play that are woven together, interconnected. Then a player's path through the game, if they're enjoying themselves, they can stick to the top. They can say, okay, I really, really like this style of play. And as soon as they start to wonder, okay, like, well, where do I go from here? Then they can switch to this other mode of play, and they can stick to that till the end of the game. I'm a very impatient and messy person, so you can always wander a whole lot if you design each of your levels with this sort of duality in place. And to me, that's pretty much the whole talk. I wanted to just conclude, I guess, by saying that to me this was sort of a revelation, because so much it felt to me like so much of game design wisdom was about saying, okay, well, here's your player, and this is the experience that you want them to have, and here is where you want them to get to. And as a game designer, your job is to set up things that keep the player on that path. Little arrows that say, hey, you're in the wrong place. You're supposed to be on this path. And sometimes they're very quiet arrows, just an invisible wall or an input, like a hard enemy that says, hey, like, this is the wrong place to be. Don't be here. And I've always found that very restrictive, because as a player, I really do like to wander a lot. So if I'm playing a game that's constructed like this, mostly I wander and I get pushed, and I get wander and I get pushed. And I'm like, well, as a player, what did I really get to choose? Whereas if you use those same little arrow tricks, but you have this, I like to draw it as two lines, because it's a lot easier, I think, as a designer to think about two things than about an entire continuum of things. Then you can still use those, oops, why did I go light? You can still use the exact same game design wisdom to keep players on this multi-stream path. You can still say, okay, well, people aren't engaging with one of the two options along the way. And then also players get to still have like a very wide sense of agency, where you go quite far in both directions, and you can bump into an arrow and say, oh, okay, I've gone too far there, but I still have this other choice available to me. And hopefully, if you've done it right, you have the entire spectrum between those two choices available as well. Okay. Yeah, I hope that made sense and was interesting. That's the end of my designing levels that don't have a right answer talk. If there's questions, Ifat, will you tell me the questions? And I asked for some questions on Twitter, and I don't know if they're too related to the topic, but if we need to fill some time with some questions, I have some.
If you have questions, you can write them now on chat. And I will wait, because I think we're like a few minutes before
of lag.
the YouTube. I don't know. I guess you can see me now. Oh no. Let me. Oh, okay. Let me hide myself.
Okay. Hold on. How do I even back to meeting? Oh, okay. I'm going to stop sharing, because I don't have anything more on my thing.
Okay. Maybe we should start with the question you had on Twitter.
Yep.
Yeah.
So first question was, what are your preferred tools or processes for making things very quickly? I really got into Godot recently. I think really what's outlined here is part of the process for making things very quickly. Like it helps to focus down and just say, okay, here is the very simple binary that is going to be helping. Let's see, how do I describe this? Well, maybe I can more broadly. I use Godot, and I use this program called Pixel Edit now. I don't know if I recommend those tools specifically. I experimented with a wide range of tools until I found some that worked for me personally. I like Pixel Edit because I specifically knew I needed to draw pixel art and use it as tiles. And the reason that I use Pixel Edit is because it does both of those things really well in one tool. I tried like a bunch of different game engines. Unity was not great. I used Flash for a while, and I'm not sure what it is about Godot. A lot of people that I've talked with about Godot who've used it really like it and think it's a lot more simple and intuitive than Unity. So I like it a lot. I'll leave the name here. Godot.
I saw you were using Bitsy as well.
I wasn't. Wait, did you see I was using Bitsy? I'm really inspired by Bitsy, and I think that that's helped me a lot. Like I want to use Bitsy, but it's kind of too constrained for me. So I ended up just borrowing some of its aesthetics. Like I make games in this 8x8 pixel art style, which I guess is a process that helps me make things very quickly. I've really adopted a singular art style lately, and I think that has helped me make things very quickly a lot. Once I decided like, okay, I'm just going to make everything with 8x8 pixel art, it made it, that was just a decision that I never had to make again. I was just focusing on this kind of one little piece of craft instead of every time deciding like, oh, what resolution should I be? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask when you were doing Starship Pilgrim and I guess any other game before that, were you using Flash?
Yeah, I wasn't using. I was just pretty much coding. It was ActionScript 3, and I think I used Flashpunk for. I'm pretty sure I used Flashpunk for Starseed Pilgrim, and at the time that was my bread and butter. All I used was ActionScript 3, and then I abandoned it when everyone said Flash was going to die. And now finally Flash is dying. So I guess I got off the ship a little early, but I'm glad that I'm making things in Godot now.
Okay. Do you want to answer maybe the other Twitter question?
Yep. Yeah. Got two more. I've got two more from Jake. So how do you think about the importance of code quality while working on small projects? Excuse me. In my head, I kind of think about code as like you're building like a foundation, and then you're building like little things that extend out of the foundation. And the things that extend out of the foundation are a lot faster to build. And no, not faster. They're kind of easier to build and more flexible. But you can't build too much on top of them, or they start to become fragile and they break a lot and they take a lot of time. So what I have been doing lately is ignoring code quality completely and then going back and saying, okay, well, this code does what I needed it to do, but it's not something I can continue to work with. And so especially on bigger projects, I'll just make something work. I'll just write some code that makes a thing work. And it's the same with like art style or level design, like just whatever processes I can use to do something very quickly. I'll do it very quickly just to get it feeling right to me. And then I will take the time to fold it properly into the project. So if you're working on a small project that you're never going to touch the code again, I wouldn't worry about code quality. And even if it's something that I think I might use again, I still wouldn't worry about code quality, but I would revisit it and say, hey, okay, like the code here does something that I would like to reuse. How can I now, after the fact, collapse this code down into something that does the same thing, but is significantly more usable from a foundational standpoint? Patrick asks, when making these games with lots of player choice, how often do these projects work out versus not work out? And do you have a strategy for improving this ratio when prototyping? I'm not sure if I have a like a statistic on how often they work out and don't work out. And this is a relatively new framework to me. I feel like I might be a little bit too arrogant when it comes to thinking about game design. Like I'm almost like, oh, like that's easy. I can like I know even though it's something that I've avoided for so long, I feel like I know how to respond to player feedback and make an experience, like a singular experience, occur. But again, like I think I'm too overconfident there. But I think that at the core of this idea is that I can use very like basic traditional like gameplay design, like game design approaches, to push people towards one of the two paths, or like to that little spectrum that I've laid out. So if a person is straying too far from both paths, then just find the one that is most likely good for them, that they'll like, and figure out how to just push them towards that, as if that's the only path in the game. How often they work out versus not work out, it's a hard question because I don't know. I think part of what I like about this approach is that I try not to worry too much about the distribution of like how many people are on which path. It's enough for me to know that I'm not pushing people towards one path, that I am pushing them onto this spectrum of choice. So if you say like how often they work out, that they land on the spectrum of choice, I don't know, but it seems not too hard, just to kind of push people towards it as if it was a regular like singular game design experience. I hope that. Oh yeah, gotcha, makes sense. So my last question from Twitter: can you tell a story about a time one of your games produced an experience for a player that you are proud of? Gosh. I think something that I'm kind of sad about is, again, maybe this is the overconfidence, or I want to call it jadedness now. I feel like when I made Starseed Pilgrim, I had very broad aspirations for what people would experience. And that's part of the open world fantasy, is that, okay, I'm going to design this expansive system within which anything can happen. And so a lot of the player stories that came out of Starseed Pilgrim, they were all things that I was proud of because I had made this system that people were engaging with and coming out of with their own wild stories, like people beating the game without using like an entire ability that I thought was absolutely necessary for the design of the game, or getting to a certain distance without realizing something. Anything that strayed from what to me was the obvious path was something to be celebrated. But going through that experience and having a lot of experience with games, now I'm kind of sad because I feel like a lot of what happens is very predictable. And I don't know if that's because I've become closed-minded and I'm quick to categorize what people tell me and just say, oh yeah. I knew that was going to happen because A, then B. And maybe I'm proud of it when someone has the experience I wanted. Like I had these enemies that, in an earlier build of Handmade Death Labyrinth, I had these enemies that looked like part of the landscape. And when you walk past them, they would animate and they would, jump out at you. And I really loved how that experience was exactly what I expected, that it worked, because I wasn't sure if it would work, because to me it was obvious because I'd placed them there. And I was trying to make it not be obvious, but there was really no way for me to know for sure how obvious it was, because my own perspective was that it was very obvious. And that was pretty recent. I feel like that was a really good experience that I am proud of. And then I didn't even put it in the game, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good story.
You have a question on YouTube. by
Oh.
Jeremiah. What are some ways that you're able to make the game world feel real or like it continues without the player progressing things forward?
Right. I'm thinking about an answer to that. In some ways, I feel like that, like again with my arrogance, I feel like that is one of the easier problems to solve. The issue is because anything can. It's really simple to just make any system that progresses without interaction. Just set up like a game of life that adds like a cell or two anytime it becomes stable. Really, the issue is how do you make a game world continue without the player progressing things forward, but also engage the player in caring about the world and wanting to progress things forward. And I think that I don't think I have a good answer. At least not off the cuff. I know Jeremiah, so maybe I'll talk to him afterwards, and if I get a good answer, I'll like tweet it or something. But that's a tough one. I guess I just want to say just make any system that out of which interesting stuff comes out. I used out twice. Good grammar. Like procedural generation is a way to do it. I think it's all about surprise, about seeing new things. So procedural generation eventually runs out of steam because as a player who's hitting the procedural generation button, eventually you start to recognize the patterns, and then you're like, well, I've already seen some iteration of this, and now it's kind of boring. And that's sort of the point at which the game world dies. And if you make a game with handmade content, it's the world can continue to feel real until it runs out of new content. So I guess it's novelty. I feel like it's novelty that, to me, makes a game world feel real. Is once it runs entirely out of new stuff, that's when it stops feeling real. Have you experimented with the world reacting differently to a player based on which path they are taking at the time? It's interesting. I've mostly been trying to keep it this consistent spectrum where, how do I put this? If it did react differently to a player based on which path they were taking, I would be worried about making it too binary, because what I like about the structure right now is that every time I approach it, it's like the fight or flight thing where you kill all the enemies or avoid all the enemies. There's a lot of intermediary states where a player would kill one enemy to make it easier for them to run past, or would run past a very hard enemy so that they can then fight, some of the other easier enemies. And I would be worried about being too explicit to the player about those two paths existing. I think that is a different thing entirely. Communicating to the player that two paths exist is something that I almost wouldn't want to do at the same time as using this design trick, because this design trick it's really for me, the designer, to feel like I know what I'm designing and that there's these twin paths. But if it becomes too obvious to the player, then there's this sort of magic that disappears when the rules become too obvious. Again, dead world. Oh, I didn't put. I should put my face up. Sorry, you said I could put my face up during the Q&A, but hopefully you guys don't mind me missing my face. What's this? Whoa. You still there? Oh, now it's just quiet. Sorry, you're coming in occasionally, and I was like, maybe Fat will come save me.
The cat was doing cat stuff.
Got it. Cats do cat stuff. No problem.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to ask a question, and then we can maybe close for now. Warn you, it's a little bit of a silly question. Um,
Okay.
but it's like, so A, what's your next move? Do you have like a game you're working on, or you're just gonna continue just experimenting and seeing what comes up? And the second question is, are you playing any video games right now, and what are you playing?
Well, I can answer B. That's easier.
Yeah,
I've been playing.
It was a stupid question, but I feel the need to ask it.
No, I love it. Well, maybe I should end on it. I'll end on a light note. I'll answer the hard question first. I'll eat my vegetables. Game I'm working on is oh geez, hold on. Maybe I can just. Do I have? Well, I'm working on this game where you're like a raccoon building a computer so that you can enter cyberspace. And that game doesn't actually have any of this twin paths thing going on so much. It's really just like a, I guess it is, but it's not using this structure because it's one that I started before I developed this structure. And after the raccoon game is called Yerke's Paradise. It's a really weird name. You can't even find it anywhere by this name, but that's what it's called right now. And that'll be coming out in January sometime, along with this magazine called Take Shape. And after that, I really want to revisit the Handmade Death Labyrinths. The one that I showed was Handmade Death Labyrinth issue 0, and it was like a really small version of what I wanted the full game to be. And I'm experimenting with this like issue structure, so we'll see. Yeah, so I want to work on Handmade Death Labyrinth issue 1, and I am going to be experimenting forever. Like I can't stop. I'll be experimenting till I die. Yeah, and am I playing any video games right now? I've been playing a bunch of Animal Crossing, and I'm really bad at Animal Crossing.
I don't know if you
have
to be good in Animal Crossing.
Oh, I know, but like we're like decorating our shared island, and I feel like I'm not pulling my weight, and I'm like I decorated the back room of my house with a bunch of like black bass models, and it looks really ridiculous, but I love it. It's just this room full of black bass and tanks and black bass models and like a big fish flag. It's fun. And I've been playing some Splatoon 2. It's still really good. I still really like playing it. Yeah, it's just actually I'll probably play Splatoon 2 like right after this talk. Yeah, Salmon Run.
I'm playing Hades, so.
Ah, nice. Yeah, I heard. I've been hearing a lot about Hades. It has like it's big.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. As someone who's not good in roguelikes, I'm still not good in Hades, but I'm enjoying it.
Cool, that's good. Yeah, I hear there's like a ton of writing, and it sounds like a really cool story that I would like to experience.
Yeah. Just talking about procedurally generated stuff. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alex. Sorry, suddenly sleepiness fell on me.
Oh, that's fine.
Thank you for doing this. It was very informative.
Cool.
And I guess this is the last of our talk for this event, but I will recommend looking at our website for the event, if I'll find it. If I'll find it, I'll post it. 1 second. But
a chat or something. Wait, maybe I can find it.
It's somewhere in Twitter. 1 second.
I think I almost got it. It's just, oh no,
Yes, I found it. I'll post the Twitter link. And if anyone has, do you wanna, Alex? Do you wanna plug something?
Oh, okay. Oh my God, I'm gonna plug the most foolish thing. I should plug my video game, my commercial release, but instead I'm gonna plug this ridiculous game jam. If you want to make or if you want to make 10 games in 10 days before the end of the year, come join my variety mega jam. There's like a ton of us. I don't know why there's so many people this time, but there's like 216 people joined and 84 entries, which is wild because last year it was like 15 entries. Yeah, it's.
Is it like
yeah,
making 7 games?
It's making so I started it like 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. It's trying to make 10 games in 10 different genres in 10 days.
Oh wow.
So it's and I've like you can make them whatever you want, and like what a genre is very up in the air. Paul Dolby's asking, is there going to be a 2021 variety jam? And yes, there will be. They're always in December. Like it's because it started at the end of a year. I just felt like, oh, I didn't make enough games this year. So I just decided to push myself and try to make, I think then it was like 9 games in 10 days. Like I was even kinder with myself then, and I still only made like 6 before giving up. It's just kind of like a really fast hyper jam that is like, to me, it's kind of like a meta jam. Like I like to just kind of have like a little bit of time to work on something and then kind of push myself to go so fast that I stop worrying about quality and I can just worry about kind of making, like trying and failing to make like just some weird new stuff and learning from it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people in the chat are actually my students, but I'm a big fan of making a lot of games, making a lot of shitty games in order to maybe
make those crap games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I make them do a lot of games.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah.
There's definitely like I feel like there's a huge, oh yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I feel like there's like I feel like it's valuable to make a division for yourself between a game that you are making for other people and a game that you are making just to like learn from, to satisfy yourself, maybe to like show to some friends. Like having that division is extremely valuable.
Yeah, I think it also helps, at least for me, with like, if I have an idea, a lot of the time ideas are not really worth that much once you start making the game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like, oh, this is the best idea ever, and then you start making it, and you're like, this is no. And this is a way of like making a lot of them very quickly. It's just a way to test those ideas.
Yeah, you just like make it, and some things work way better than you expect them to, and other ones just don't work at all. And you just can't tell until you put it in front of like a couple people, and they tell you, no, this is terrible, or this is amazing, I want to play it forever. And you're like, really?
Yeah. Okay. I guess. Anything else to plug before we end?
Yeah, I'll link I'll link the thing that a smart person would plug. Let me find it. Steam handmade death oh my god, it's so hard to type. So this is the game that I actually made with this sort of dichotomy in mind. It's a pretty short game. It's 10 minutes long. It's supposed to be 10 minutes long. It's actually longer than that. And it's called Handmade Death Labyrinth Issue 0. I don't have anything like upcoming that I can plug yet. Like Take Shape magazine is going to be coming out at some point, and I will be releasing a cool free game for that. You can, let's see, I need a mailing list or something. Well, I don't have a mailing list, but if you at me on Twitter, I'll add you to my future mailing list. Twitter.com/Droqen.
About the Discord stuff just before. Gotta do the Discord.
The disc. Oh yeah. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I can do the Discord. Okay, let's see. Invite people. Okay, my invite link. So this Discord is somewhat explicitly for finding playtesters for my games, because I find that I need, like, when I make a thing, I often will need to share it with some people to see how they feel about it. So I made this Discord for keeping track of other people who would like to play my games early before they come out, and help me out and give me feedback and stuff. So if you're interested in that, you can join that Discord. It is called Droqen's Paradise. It's for broken, unfinished games, and I'll appreciate your existence.
Okay. Thank you very much.